Ryan, I've never seen your physical radar, but you always have one.
I've got a radar.
What's on it today?
It's right here, and it's also in the teleprompter. So, after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, people in Michigan began collecting the signatures required to vote on amending the state's constitution to enshrine a legal right to abortion. After all, that's what Sam Alito and his allies on the Supreme Court argued, that the decision was best left to the people back in the states. Now, you need 425,000 signatures to get on the ballot. Quite a high bar, especially given that fewer than 3 million people even voted in Michigan's last election. But the energy around the petition gathering was off the charts, and the organizers turned in a stunning 753,759 signatures. The will of the people in Michigan couldn't be clearer. They want to vote on this issue. And all that was left was for the Michigan Board of Elections to certify the signatures. The BOE staff analyzed what was turned in and found them to have way more than enough legitimate signatures, and then the Republicans stepped in. The measure needed 3 votes to clear the BOE and get on the ballot, and it got the support of both Democrats, but both Republicans voted no. They didn't claim that the organizers didn't have enough signatures, they just didn't care. Their 2 opinions, they said, count more than those of 753,759 of their fellow Michigan residents. The organizers now are going to appeal the rejection to the state's courts, and the Michigan Supreme Court has a Democratic majority, so I suspect that the measure will eventually make it onto the ballot. But it's important to think about what it means that Republicans would even dare to try to keep voters from being able to vote on this question after spending decades saying that it shouldn't be the court that makes abortion law, but states should make it. What they mean, though, is they only want the gerrymandered state legislature to make the call. And the 2 things are related because with abortion on the ballot, turnout will be huge in Michigan. Republicans have controlled the state House since 2010 and the Senate since the 1980s, but with redistricting, Democrats have a shot at flipping them both. Higher turnout would make that much easier. And it filters to congressional elections, too. There are at least 3 seats up for grabs in Michigan, and if Democrats can grab them all, they're a step closer to holding the House. Now, a few months ago, Republicans had a lock on flipping it, and they're still heavily favored, but particularly after this week, it's no longer guaranteed. Alaska voters went to the polls, and pundits expected this candidate,
right-wing and bitter clinging proud clingers of our guns, our God, and our religions, and our...
to win easily. They thought she was a shoo-in, but instead, she lost to Democrat Mary Peltola, the first Native Alaskan ever elected to Congress. There'll be a rematch now in November. Now, since Republicans overturned Roe v. Wade, they've been getting wrecked at the polls in special elections. Ryan Matsumoto, an analyst at Inside Elections, breaks them down like this. So Nebraska, the Nebraska 1st District, which Trump won by 15 points, moved to Republican winning by just 5. Minnesota 01, that was Trump won that by 10, Republicans only won it by 4. New York 19, Biden won that by 1.5. Democrats recently won it by 2.2. In New York 23, Trump won that by plus 11. But then Republicans in the special election only won it by 6, a 5-point swing. And then in Alaska, Trump obviously carried that by 10 points. Democrats won the most recent election this week by 3 points. Now, 1 or 2 of those could be a fluke. Maybe ranked choice voting threw the one in Alaska off. But the ground is shifting. People are furious. And the answer from Michigan Republicans is to just not let people vote. And so, Emily, I wonder, is this the strategy? Like, because we were talking earlier, it's a minority position, particularly in Michigan, to say that abortion should be strictly illegal.
Yeah.
So the only way it seems to maintain that is to prevent people from voting on it. Like, is that where Republicans are going to try to take this? And do you expect it'll still get on the ballot?
I don't think so. I mean, so one thing I would say is that Republicans see is a very similar flip side to the dynamic you just explained, which is that it's absolutely true Roe polled poorly, or repealing Roe polled very poorly in name. So like 60% of people said they supported Roe. But that said, if you poll what people think about whether there should be limits, you know, when you get into the second trimester, public opinion gets very, very divided, and it's overwhelming when you get into the third trimester. And so Republicans see that as the messaging against abortion, and actually really believe that you can, because midterms are about base turnout, that you can mobilize turnout for your candidate in a midterm election by talking about abortion, by having that conversation openly, because it forces Democrats to say, when a reporter asks them, if a reporter asks them, would you support any limits to abortion? Which is just, if you can't answer that question, you're not going to be, that's not going to be in the mainstream. Whether or not voters will care enough to actually get out and pull the lever because of that is a different question. And that, I think, we have seen evidence, at least on the left and in the middle, people do care enough. It does animate voters, and that's the distinction. And will that animate Republican and independents in the other direction if Republicans are able to talk about that? I don't know. It's an open question.
I think this is an example where messaging actually meets substance. There's theory and then there's practice. So in theory, people have takes on abortion, but abortion has been a constitutional right since Roe v. Wade. And so I think the polling on it was very difficult to tell the salience of the issue and what exactly people felt about it until it's actually taken away.
Yeah.
And so when you take it away, now all of a sudden, yes, you have the kind of the quote unquote pro-life movement, that's going to come out. They're fired up and they're going to vote. But in the past, you didn't have that balanced by kind of an abortion rights surge, because people didn't actually believe necessarily that they were going to lose on this issue, that Republicans would actually have the chutzpah to go ahead and do this. But now that they've done it, I think you're seeing all of these people who in the past wouldn't talk about it, or in the past wouldn't vote on it, including independents and Democrats, swinging wildly on this issue. And also, Democratic elites never cared about this issue. Like they thought it was icky. They didn't
Same
want
with Republican elites.
Yeah, they didn't really want to go there. And the abortion rights groups talked about this for decades. Their frustration, their inability to get. No matter what type of focus grouping and what type of polling they showed to Democratic leaders, like we don't really want to. This is not our issue. This is like what the Republicans run on. Let them do that, and we're going to run on whatever we're going to run on whatever they poll in these swing districts. But now it's been forced on them, and they're seeing, because of those special elections that I mentioned, that actually the abortion rights groups for decades have been right. That there actually is a latent and deep support for the right to choose among the American public, that does correlate apparently to that 60% that people thought was softer than it was. It's actually, when you take it away, then that 60% is actually no, like we want that back. And the question is, do they get tangled up in the kind of the extreme wing of it?
And I think that's the rub. When you take it away, it is stronger than when it was actually existent. And the other thing I wanted to mention is when you're looking at those numbers, Nebraska, all those other districts that the tweet went through, it's such an interesting insight into how I actually think, I see this less as an issue of abortion and more a referendum on Trump to a way that actually is favorable to Trump, because these areas, we're talking Nebraska, Minnesota, and New York, these are rural districts.
Right, rural and suburban New York districts.
The Republican Party has nobody is Trump. Nobody will ever be Trump again. And Trump is the ultimate double-edged sword for all of his flaws. The advantages of the sort of bulldozer mentality politically that can get, white working class voters who may have voted for Obama to actually vote Republican. There are just so few other candidates. There's basically no other candidate that can do it in a way that was as appealing to many people as what he did. And so when he's not on the ballot, Republicans have not figured out at all how to tap into that. And also, I think Biden is a really probably not as good candidate as some of the others that were recruited.
Yeah, and I think that's why Biden kept saying Trump and MAGA Republicans.
Yes.
Because Trump, with the MAGA brand, can counteract his negatives, because he can bring out enough people that it balances out. If he still loses a little bit, but because of the structural advantages Republicans have, you can still win the Electoral College and lose the national vote. But Trump and MAGA Republicans, so the negatives on MAGA without Trump bringing out the base, that's Democrats' sweet spot, they think. Like if they can get Trump branding, but then there isn't Trump to pull people out to the polls, but the branding pulls their own people out to the polls,
Exactly.
then they think they've got it made.
And it's totally intentional, and it's why, again, yeah, they're planning more J6 hearings. They're going to continue to do some talk about the Mar-a-Lago raid. It's never going to go away in this election cycle, and it's because they want to drag every single Republican into that bucket that Joe Biden gave a speech on last night.
Yep.
There you go.
All right, up next, I think we got, David Sirota from Denver. Maybe he's going to talk about the 4-day fish show that just started last night out there. All right, stick around for that.